Brad was doing such a good job. Why don't I sit down? Why don't you keep talking about the book, Brad? He is an incredibly understated person who has many more achievements than he ever brags about. Some of us are given to shameless self-promotion. Brad isn't. I also want to say thank you all for coming out on such an awful night. I am going to report, if I see him sometime, to Ed Rendell that there are no wusses among the politics and prose crowd. I had a terrible paranoid feeling on the way over here when the rain was really torrential, that the Koch brothers had seeded the clouds, or maybe some other super PAC. And I quickly realized there were two things wrong with this theory. One is I'm not that important. But two, I like to think that the Koch brothers believe so much in individual liberty that they like the free exchange of ideas and also honor the commerce done at great small businesses like Politics and Prose. And this is an extraordinary community. This bookstore in some ways represents what I write about in the book, this balance of individualism and community, because this is where commerce really does come together with a community. And we all wish that Carla Cohen could be with us tonight. And I got a very sweet note from David, who couldn't be here. But we are very, very fortunate that we have Brad and Lissa as stewards of this extraordinary tradition. And I really think that their view of their role is not simply as owners, but as stewards. And that's why this store continues to be so popular and so important as all of us in this community. I have so many kind friends who came out on this night. I cannot mention them all, but I just want to say bless you for coming. I've said many times that if God judges me not by what I've done, but by my friends, I'll do okay. And I just want to thank you all for coming out. And I particularly want to thank my wife, Mary, for being here. She's already heard way too much about this book, every single aspect of this book. And then my Amazon number on a given day, although I shouldn't mention that, that's only for the C-SPAN audience. And then I gave up looking at that. I decided that this was another addiction I needed to give up. And the book has a patriotic theme, and I'm really glad I wrote it this year because I actually met Mary on Patriots' Day, which is April 19th, 25 years ago this year. And so I could acknowledge that in the book. So I love you, Mary. And I think my daughter Julia is here somewhere, and she's representing all her brothers and sisters. Bless you, Jewel, for being able to put up with me for another hour on this book. It's so good of you. It is so good of you to come. This book is to me is one of the most important things I've done in a long time. And it begins actually by talking about American decline, but it is very much not a declinist book. In fact, I would argue it's very much an anti-declinist book. The book does grow out of a love I have had for the American story since I was in grade school, and I acknowledge a lot of teachers at the beginning of the book. A whole group of teachers going back to high school history teachers. If there are any teachers in this room, I salute you too. And the paradox is that the first sentence of the book refers to decline, but it's not a declinist book. It's a hopeful book. Indeed, I note that the fact that we so often go through declinist periods as a nation is actually a sign of what a very high opinion we have of ourselves. We Americans always think we are in a place from which we can decline. And I argue in the book, it's true. So we always think we're doing pretty well, and we're on the verge of decline. And the core argument of the book is that the way to avoid decline is to refresh the balance that Brad mentioned between our love of individualism and our deep affection for community. It's important that out of declinist moments have come extraordinary politicians and extraordinary political campaigns. I think Barack Obama's election was very much rooted in a sense that he was the person to solve a kind of spiritual crisis that tends to accompany declinist feelings. We start out saying it's about economics or it's about foreign policy, but quickly we begin to ask questions about who we are as a people. What is wrong with us? And I think when you look back to the Obama campaign, you just think of the slogans he used, those posters with the word hope on them, or the slogan, change we can believe in. I've always thought the word believe in that change we can believe in slogan was at least as important as the word hope, because Americans wanted to believe in themselves again. And when we go through periods such as this, we often reach back into our history for enlightenment, even though we often disagree about what the lessons of history are. And so while my book is extremely critical of the Tea Party's view of both current politics and our history, I actually acknowledge the Tea Party at the beginning of the book for encouraging us all to look back to our founding and to our long history. Indeed, I think that those of us on the progressive side have not embraced the American story enough. I think in the end, if you look at the American story, it is a profoundly progressive story. It is a story in which we began as far less a democratic nation than we are today. Voting was restricted to people of property, and then we extended it to white men without property, and then we extended it to African Americans. We took their rights away, and then they won them back 100 years later. We extended the vote to women. We made ourselves a far more just society. So those of us who are on the progressive side, I think, should take great pride in this story, and we should talk about what it means. Why should our conservative friends be the only people who carry around copies of the Constitution in their pockets? Why do we leave quoting the Federalists to our conservative friends? Why do we leave the Declaration of Independence to them? The most forward-looking politicians and moral spokesmen in our history did not do that. Go back to Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. The entire first part of that speech is about the American story. It's about the American promise, the promises that the United States made to all of its people to equality. And Dr. King, for those of you who love that speech as much as I do, spoke famously of that promissory note that had been given to African Americans that came back stamped unpaid, insufficient funds. This is someone who understood the promise of the American story. Abraham Lincoln's most important political speech before he was president was his address at Cooper Union, where he went back to make an argument that the founders ultimately foresaw, as he did, the extinction of slavery in the United States. And Lincoln did months of historical research to give the speech that Harold Holzer, the great Lincoln scholar, thinks made him our president. So the core argument of the book is that we are torn between this healthy tension between our love of individualism and our affection for community. And I think we have too often, and particularly in recent years, told our story almost entirely on the individualistic side. We have emphasized individual liberty to the exclusion of our dedication to community and also to equality, which we argue about in every generation. Now, I want to make clear that my book is not a pure communitarian book. I am not arguing that liberty is not important to us. I am arguing that the very view we have of liberty depends on the idea that it must be defended. We must defend it in common. We should remember, for example, that the very first word of the Constitution of the United States is not I. It's not individual. It's not even liberty. The first word of the American Constitution is we, as in we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare. Yes, welfare is in the first paragraph of the American Constitution. And secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution. It's a we Constitution, not an I Constitution. The Declaration of Independence is a perfect reflection of this balance between individualism and community. We're all familiar with the beginning and the commitment to our unalienable rights that come from our Creator, that among these being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is part of us. That is part of our individualistic, liberty-loving selves. But the very last paragraph of the Declaration is where the founders